This presentation covers the nutrition findings from the 2024 Malawi Demographic and Healthy Survey. We will cover 5 key areas: nutritional status of children, including stunting, wasting and overweight, breastfeeding and infant and young child feeding practices, anemia among children and women, micronutrients covering supplementation and dorming, and nutritional status of women. Nutritional status of children. Trends in child growth measures. Looking at trends over time, the percentage of children under 5 who are stunted has declined from 55% in 1992 to 38% in 2024. Underweight has declined from 24% in 1992 to 10% in 2024. Overweight has declined from 9% in 1992 to 6% in 2024. Wasting has decreased from 6% in 1992 to 2% in 2024. Child growth measures by sex. Among children under 5 with suboptimal growth by sex. For stunting, 40% of male children are stunted compared to 36% of female children. For wasting, 2% of both male and female children are wasted. For overweight, 7% of male children are overweight compared to 6% of female children. Child growth measures by mother's education. Among children under 5 who are malnourished by mother's education, for stunting, 16% of children whose mothers have no education are stunted compared to 13% for primary education, 10% for secondary education, and 6% for more than secondary education. For overweight, the pattern is reversed. 6% of children whose mothers have no education are overweight compared to 14% for mothers with more than secondary education. Child growth measures by wealth. Among children under 5 with suboptimal growth by wealth quintile. For stunting, 43% of children in the poorest households are stunted compared to 41% in the second quintile, 38% in the middle quintile, 36% in the fourth quintile, and 29% in the wealthiest households. For wasting, 3% of children in the poorest households are wasted compared to 1% in the wealthiest households. Stunting by region. The percentage of children under 5 who are stunted by region. The northern region has 33%, the central region has 39%, the southern region has 39%. The national average is 38%. Wasting by region. The percentage of children under 5 who are wasted by region. The northern region has 3%, the central region has 1%, the southern region has 2%, the national average is 2%. Overweight by region. The percentage of children under 5 who are overweight by region. The northern region has 5%, the central region has 7%, the southern region has 6%, the national average is 6%. Child growth monitoring. Among children under 5 who had selected measurements performed by a healthcare provider in the 3 months preceding the survey, 65% had their weight measured, 25% had their height measured, 26% had their mid-upper arm circumference MUSC measured, 24% had both weight and height measured, 14% had weight, height, and MUSC measured. Section 2. Breastfeeding and infant and young child feeding IYCF practices. Early breastfeeding. Among children under 2, 97% were ever breastfed. 68% were put to the breast within 1 hour of birth. 94% were exclusively breastfed for the first 2 days after birth. Breastfeeding status of children under 6 months. Among youngest children under 6 months living with their mother by feeding category. 60% are exclusively breastfed with breast milk only. 9% receive breast milk and plain water only. 2% receive breast milk and non-milk liquids. 3% receive breast milk and animal milk or infant formula. 19% receive breast milk and solid, semi-solid or soft foods. 2% are not breastfed. 5% are unknown. Introduction of complementary foods. 93% of children under 6 to 8 months were fed solid, semi-solid or soft foods the previous day. Minimum acceptable diet by residents. Among youngest children under 6 to 23 months living with their mother who received minimum dietary diversity, minimum meal frequency, and minimum milk feeding frequency, the national average is 13%. In urban areas, 16% receive a minimum acceptable diet. In rural areas, 12% receive a minimum acceptable diet. Unhealthy feeding practices. Among youngest children, aged 6 to 23 months, living with their mother who consumed unhealthy foods, 23% consumed a sweet beverage, 21% consumed unhealthy food, 23% consumed zero vegetables or fruit. Infant and young child feeding (IYCF) indicators. Among children who were fed the following during the previous day, 78% of children aged 12 to 23 months were fed breast milk. 24% of children aged 6 to 23 months were fed foods and beverages from at least 5 out of 8 food groups. 38% were fed solid, semi-solid or soft foods the minimum number of times or more. 8% were given at least 2 milk feeds. 30% were fed egg and or flesh food. 8% of children aged 0 to 23 months were fed from a bottle with a nipple. IYCF counseling by residents. Among women aged 15 to 49 whose youngest child age 6 to 23 months is living with them, percent who talked with a healthcare provider or community health worker about what to feed their child in the last 6 months. The national average is 37%. In urban areas, 24% received counseling. In rural areas, 39% received counseling. Section 3. Anemia. Among children aged 6 to 59 months with anemia, 56% have any anemia, 27% have mild anemia, 27% have moderate anemia, 3% have severe anemia. Anemia in women. Among women aged 15 to 49 with anemia, for pregnant women, 41% have any anemia, with 20% having mild anemia, 19% having moderate anemia, and 2% having severe anemia. For non-pregnant women, 35% have any anemia, with 20% having mild anemia, 14% having moderate anemia, and 2% having severe anemia. Section 4. Micronutrients. Micronutrient supplementation and deworming among children. Among children aged 6 to 59 months, 62% received a vitamin A supplement in the last 6 months. 17% received iron-containing supplements in the last 12 months. 10% received multiple micronutrient powders in the last 12 months. 10% received multiple micronutrient powders in the last 12 months. 12% received iron tablets or syrups in the last 12 months. Among children aged 12 to 59 months, 40% received deworming medication in the last 6 months. Section 5. Nutritional status of women. Among women aged 15 to 19 by body mass index BMI for age, 1% are moderately on severely thin, 9% are mildly thin, 81% have normal BMI, 9% are overweight, 1% are obese. Among women aged 20 to 49 by BMI, 1% are moderately or severely thin, 4% mildly thin, 67% have normal BMI, 20% are overweight, 8% are obese. Minimum dietary diversity among women by residence. Among women aged 15 to 49 who consumed foods from 5 or more of 10 food groups, the national average is 32%. In urban areas, 37% achieved minimum dietary diversity. In rural areas, 30% achieved minimum dietary diversity. Unhealthy food and beverage consumption among women by residence. Among women aged 15 to 49 who consumed unhealthy foods and beverages, for sweet beverages, the national average is 27%, with 47% in urban areas and 28% in rural areas. For unhealthy food, the national average is 23%, with 22% in urban areas and 21% in rural areas. This concludes the presentation on nutrition from the 2024 Malawi Demographic and Healthy Survey.